In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a painting by numbers tool in Microsoft Excel using conditional formatting. I have an example here. You can see on the left-hand side I have a color chart with the numbers 1 to 10 listed next to it. For example, I have red and the number 2, which means that if I type the number 2 anywhere at all in these cells, those cells turn red. Similarly, I have green and the number 5. So wherever I type a number 5, that cell turns green. And it's possible, using just the numbers 1 to 10, like this, to create quite detailed pictures using nothing but conditional formatting. As well as being a great way of learning and understanding how conditional formatting works in Microsoft Excel, this painting by numbers tool is also a good way of explaining how images and photographs can end up being stored as data using just numbers. For example, if every student in the class creates a grid that is the same dimensions as everybody else, then it's possible for them to create pictures from numbers and just send those numbers as a file by themselves, which can then be copied and pasted into anyone's drawing, anyone's painting by numbers grid, to be able to share those pictures. Here you have a couple of examples that I did earlier on. You can see that the numbers themselves don't give away anything at all about what the picture is. And yet just by painting those numbers into a spreadsheet that has the conditional formatting rules set in it, you can create pretty detailed pictures. So let's see how this is possible. I'm going to open up a new spreadsheet here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And because I want all my cells to be square, I'm going to just change the width of all the columns. Now, to change the width of all the columns at the same time, what I'll need to do is click on this little blank square to the left of the column A and above row 1. Clicking that selects the whole spreadsheet. And then if I make any one of these columns wider or narrower, all the columns snap to the same width. So what I'm going to do is change that column so that the cells are roughly square. And now I have a spreadsheet just with squares in. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type the numbers 1 to 10 in this column here. And in fact, I'm also just going to set the alignment to center for all the numbers. So I'm going to type the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And the next thing I'm going to do is choose the colours that I want each of these to be associated with. Now, of course, if you're going to share these number charts, the pictures, from one person to another, then it will be important to have a standard that's agreed. For example, 1 must always be black, 2 must always be red. Otherwise, you're going to get some very interesting and rather odd images. But for the moment, I'm just going to kind of make this up as I go along. So I'm going to have red, I'm going to have some green there. One thing I would recommend, because it'll get a little bit tricky otherwise, is to use the standard colours. So rather than going off into the more colours and then choosing this chart here, which potentially allows you to access thousands, millions of different colours, stick with the ones that are on this main chart here. That'll make things a little bit easier later on, and you will see why. I'm going to put in some greys there as well. We will also, of course, want white in there. What have we got? Orange, perhaps, a dark orange in there. Let's have a different shade of green. And this one we're going to have simply as white. There we go. I'm now going to select that little color chart and come up to borders and click on all borders, just like that. The next thing I'm going to do is create my grid where I want the picture to appear. Now again, if you're creating this so that it can be shared with other people, then it will be important for the grid to be exactly the same number of columns across and the number of rows down. For the moment, I'm just going to do this a bit random. I'm going to choose something like that. And all I'm going to do now is go back up to the Borders button and choose a thick outside border. There we go. Now at this point, we don't particularly need the grid lines. So I'm going to go to View and click off the grid lines. So now we just have a plain white spreadsheet. Okay, it's time now for the conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole of the area where the picture will appear. I'm going to start at the top left and simply drag down to the bottom right. There we go. Now, conditional formatting is in the middle of the Home tab, so make sure you're in the Home tab and find conditional formatting. Depending upon the version of Microsoft Excel that you have, it might look slightly different to mine, but it will be there. Once you click on conditional formatting, you have a drop-down menu. Simply go to the very bottom and choose Manage Rules. And this is where all of the rules will appear. What's a rule? Well, a rule is simply a way of telling the computer what to do when you put something into a cell. So for example, if we put the number 6 into a cell, we want the computer to turn that cell yellow. So that's a rule. Turn it yellow if we put a 6 in it. That's the rule. So what we're going to do now is add 10 rules, one for each of these colours. And we create each rule in exactly the same way. So I'll show you the first one slowly. I'll show you the second one a little bit faster, and then I'll whiz through some of the others, but I won't do all of them in this video, just so that you get the idea. Feel free to pause the video, rewind it, go back over a bit and watch it a few more times. Follow along with me until you understand how to make a rule. Okay, so click on New Rule first of all, and from this list at the top, simply choose the bottom option, which is Use a formula to determine which cells to format. We're always going to be using that option. In fact, for most conditional formatting rules that you'll be doing in school, this will be perfectly fine. So use a formula. Always click on that link. Next, in this cell here, we want to put in the rule. So what is it that we want? Well, we're going to check whether, and we start this rule with an equals, this cell here is equal to the number 1. So the rule is equals H3, don't worry about the dollars just for the moment, equals 1. So if H3 equals 1, in other words, if we've put a 1 in H3, we want that cell to go black. So here's the format button, so let's choose that. Now there are 4 tabs in this pop-up window. The 2 that we'll want are Fill and Font. We'll do Fill first of all. So what we have to do now is choose the exact same colour as we chose over here. And this is why I said earlier on, it's best to go for the standard colours which will appear in this chart here. Otherwise you have to go off to more colours and try and find the one that you chose on the left. So as I chose black, I'm going to click on black, and if I was to just simply click OK now, what we'd end up with is the font colour being different to the back colour perhaps. So we want them both to be the same colour, otherwise we're going to see numbers all over our picture. So go to Font and change that to black as well. So we have black for the fill and black for the font. Once you've done both of those two things, click OK. We'll see a preview if at this point you see a number appearing in this cell. Well, perhaps you haven't changed the font to the right colour. Now, there's one final thing that we have to do before finishing this rule. And you'll see over here that we have these dollar signs here. Now, I'm not going to cover in too much detail now what those mean, but we need to get rid of them for this particular tool. There are 2 ways of getting rid of those dollars. You can either click inside this little rule box here and delete the dollars, which you can do quite easily. But there is also a keyboard shortcut that will do it for you a little bit more easily. And the keyboard shortcut is simply the F4 key at the top of your keyboard. So at the very top of your keyboard, you have a range of function buttons, F1 to F12, and it's the F4 button that you want to press. If I press the F4 button whilst I've clicked inside this cell reference here, so I've clicked somewhere in the middle of this H3 reference, and then I press F4, it gets rid of one of the dollars. Press F4 again, it gets rid of the other dollar but puts the first one back. And if I press it a third time, it gets rid of all of the dollars. So again, if I put that back, I just press the F4 key 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and the dollars are gone. And that's the way I recommend doing this each time. So let's click OK, and then click OK again, and we can test our rule. So if I type a 1 in any of these cells, you'll see that that cell now goes black. Okay. We need to add a couple more rules. You'll be adding all of these. Of course, you don't have to do 10. You can do 4 or 5, or you can do 20. It's entirely up to you. But remember, if you're sharing these with somebody else, you will need to have a standard of the colours and the numbers. So add the second rule then. Let's do the rule for number 2. So again, I select the whole of the canvas where my picture will appear. And then I click on Conditional Formatting and Manage Rules. There's my first rule. We're going to add a second one. So again, we click New Rule. Again, we come down to the bottom and click Use a Formula. And then in this cell, we type equals, click on the top left cell in our canvas area, and then another equals, and whatever the next number is. In this case, the next number is 2. Now, if we type a 2, we want the cell to go red. So in the Format button here, I'm going to click on Format. I'm going to choose Fill and choose the same red that I used up here. And then go to Font and choose the same colour for the font. If I was to choose a different colour here, what you'll see happen is that we'd end up with a yellow number on a red background, which obviously wouldn't look too good in our picture. Similarly, if we don't change the font colour at all, we're going to end up with a black font on a red background. So it's important to make sure that we always choose the font colour and the fill colour and make sure that they're the same. Now, before I close this, I will need to get rid of those dollars again. So I click in the middle of that cell reference and I type the F4 key 3 times. 1, 2, 3, the dollars are gone. You can, of course, simply type equals H3 equals and the number if you wish to. It's up to you, but don't forget yours won't necessarily be H3. It depends upon where your canvas begins. Click OK, and that's our second rule. Let's just add one more rule for this example. I'm going to do the rule for number 3. So I'll do this a little bit more quickly this time. So new rule, use a formula, equals, top left cell, equals 3, and then we'll choose the green color that I chose there, which was that one there, and then again down here, and then get rid of the dollar signs, and we're done. So I've got the rules now for the numbers 1, 2 and 3. So if I click OK, I can type 1s and get some black cells. I can type 2 and get red cells. And I can type 3 and get some green cells. And so using those, I could create some simple pictures, or just some confetti perhaps. So what you'll need to do now is to create as many rules as you want for as many different colors as you need. And then once you have done that, create some images. And then what you can do is take those images and turn them just into numbers. Let's see how to do that. What I've got here is a spreadsheet or a canvas that does contain some numbers, but it also contains some blanks. So what I'm going to do is select all of the cells within my canvas and I'm going to copy them. Now, if I go into a new spreadsheet and I paste those numbers, I've just pasted at the moment and it's been clever, it's copied across the rules as well. But actually I just want to paste the values, the numbers. So what I'm going to do on sheet 2 is I'm going to go to the paste button at the top left and you'll see how it's broken into two halves. I'm going to click the bottom half, which looks a little bit complicated. There are lots of different ways of pasting, but you'll see we have three main categories: paste, paste values, and other paste options. If we go into the paste values and simply choose the first one, click, we've just pasted all of the numbers. So you can see that that basically is my canvas that I had earlier on. If I just squash those all up to squares, you can see that that's my canvas, and there are the numbers inside it. In just the same way as the example I showed you earlier, I can have a grid of numbers, and then if I was to copy that and paste it into an empty spreadsheet or even into Notepad, I could then share that with somebody else who'd be able to paste in the numbers and, using their conditional formatting rules, see my picture. So I hope you enjoyed that. Have fun making it, and if you have any questions at all and you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment below. Thanks very much for watching.